Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to our latest episode of the Weekly Crusaders. My name's Sean Waskrug. With me, as always, is Brian Michaels. And this week, we are a little behind on schedule, clearly, but we are talking about movies that got released on March 5th through the 11th. Obviously, we said on last episode that we've been pretty busy, both of us lately, with schedules and work and stuff like that. So we actually decided to skip this week's Weekly Crusaders so we could catch up. So there will not be a Weekly Crusaders for the week of the 12th through the 18th, basically because there were movies that came out, but nothing that we
looked at the calendar. We're like, there's nothing worth our time, honestly.
Like, if there's ever a week to skip, this is the week. So we
skip spring break. There you go.
Exactly. This is our spring break episode, but we will be talking about the one that we were originally going to shoot earlier in the week, but we, like I said, schedules and conflicts happened and we weren't able to shoot this. But we are talking about two movies today. One is more of a defense movie, and the other one is a favorite of Brian's. We're going to start with mine, which is the defense movie. And what I mean by defense movie is I feel like this movie critically, historically, has been dragged through the mud, ripped, shredded, compacted, trailed out as a piece of shit, and acted as one of the biggest flops in Disney history. I don't think it deserves that. And that is 2012's John Carter. John Carter came out March 9th, 2012, had a budget of $250 million, had a weekend opening of $30.18 million, opened up second on the weekend, was his highest ranking, and had a finished box office of $284.14 million, $73.1 million domestic, and $211.1 million international.
Wow.
Now, yeah, it was really an international.
I didn't know it was such a hit internationally. Okay.
Yeah. And for anyone, before you guys go, biggest flop. We've explained this on those shows before. Before you guys go, well, the finished box office was more than the budget by about 34 mil. That's not how movies work. For a movie studio to make back a profit of what they did put in the movie, you usually have to make double, sometimes even triple than what the budget of the film was. So if a movie it cost $250 million to make, they basically had to do at least $500 to $750 million in order to see a profit out of it. Do you agree with that, Brian?
Because of marketing, because of distribution costs, all that kind of stuff.
Toys, all that kind of stuff. So just because by it only getting 34 million more than what it made, that is considered a huge, huge, huge flop. But here's my defense of John Carter. John Carter was the movie that was the book, was one of the very, very first sci-fi film or books ever written. It's literally what spawned Star Wars, that and Kurosawa. It sparked all these sci-fi films. So John Carter was literally the staple point of sci-fi fantasy and all that kind of stuff. I think they came out at the wrong time. Nothing against Taylor Kitsch, but I think they chose the wrong actor for the lead role. But the main problem that falls under this film is not the movie itself. It was Disney and the way they advertised this film, the way they pitched this movie, the way that their commercials showed this movie. They basically self-destructed this movie before it even got released. Because I remember going into this back in 2012 and watching the ads and the commercials and everything for it. And I'm like, wow, this looks like a train wreck. This looks really, really bad. And still went and saw it because I wanted to see it because I like Taylor Kitsch because I love Friday Night Lights and Willem Dafoe's in it. And I really wanted to see where it went. And I remember watching the movie going, this isn't bad. It's not great, but it's really not bad. It's a solid sci-fi film. And then I'm watching, I was like, this is bad because Disney really kind of fucked this movie over. Like, they did everything they could to basically bury this movie before it came out, and I don't think it deserves all this hate. It's considered one of the biggest box office failures in movie history, and I don't blame the movie for it. I think the movie actually has a solid ground with it. It's got solid plot. The characters are fine throughout the film. The special effects are decent for what it is back in 2012. I, for the most part, enjoyed the movie throughout. It doesn't deserve this critical acclaim of hatred that people are giving this film. And I think a lot of it has to do with how it was marketed and advertised. And Disney really just didn't believe in this film. And I feel like a lot of this is Disney's fault and not the director and the cast and the crew that made this film. Now, Brian could have totally disagree and be on the side of the masses, but I definitely think that this movie was wrongly abused by everybody. You're smiling, so I'm assuming you're going with the masses.
Not really. Well, I mean, I did not like the movie that much. I did not think it was that good, and my score I gave it is a somewhat negative score. But it is by far not the train wreck that it is made out to be. I think that it's one of those movies that people just latch on to talk about, like, oh, this is the ultimate flop, and then everybody just piles onto it. It just becomes like the cool thing to criticize and make fun of this movie. I think that the failure of it was a number of things. I think that for starters, Taylor Kitsch at the time was they're trying to push him as the new Hollywood it guy, which they always latch on to people and do that. They did with Colin Farrell when he first came out. They did with Channing Tatum when he first came out.
Yeah.
And in those two cases, eventually, the hype dies down and they find their footing. They actually become successful actors once people let them have, decide for themselves. But things like Taylor Kitsch, for a while, they're trying to do with Sam Worthington when he was first in Avatar and Terminator, some other stuff, trying to shove him down our throats.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, we're sick of seeing this guy. Stop trying to tell us who is the new it guy. There's that. There's the fact that while this book was written a long time, this is the same guy who wrote Tarzan originally, Edgar Rice Burroughs, who I like. They made him a character in the movie, by the way. But is an old character who all these other things have been based on. But the problem is, since then, the story has been done so many times. This was compared a lot to Avatar, and when you think about it, it's compared to all the same things Avatar is compared to, from Pocahontas and Last of the Mohicans to Ferngully to Last Samurai to whatever. This story has been done a million times, and especially with Avatar, just a couple of years earlier in the sci-fi setting. So even though this story existed first, I think it was viewed by modern audiences as, oh, this is an Avatar knockoff. Because, not a lot of people are familiar with the books, honestly. And that's the other thing, is then they give it this blandest title in the world of John Carter. And then are they assuming that everyone knew the books? Because the books were called, well, first one was Princess of Mars and then John Carter of Mars, which originally was the title of this movie, John Carter of Mars, which at least tells people it's, this sci-fi thing. Yeah. And this is just John Carter. It's like, well, what the hell is John Carter? It could be John Wick for all we know.
If John Wick worked for John Wick.
John Wick didn't exist yet. Well, then the first John Wick was not a giant hit at the box office because Keanu had been doing those.
Turned into a cult, and then
it turned into a great thing.
It is, yeah.
But there's just the marketing of it, like you said, including starting first and foremost with the title of the movie, I think did not do it a service, and that I think they tried to market it as. They were still high. Disney was still high off their Pirates of the Caribbean money.
Yeah.
And so they tried to turn the Lone Ranger into another Pirates of the Caribbean movie, which I actually enjoyed Lone Ranger for the most part more than most people. But it definitely was trying to be Pirates of the Caribbean. And then we got to this one, a little bit in the movie, but more in the marketing. They tried to be like, well, this is Pirates of the Caribbean in space. And that's not what this movie is.
Well, that and the marketing also, every trailer, everything was like, from the book that started Star Wars.
Yeah.
And from the minds that gave you Star Wars. Like they kept trying to make sure you guys needed to know Star Wars would not have been a thing if this movie had not existed. And it's like, but no, because then you're constantly going to compare it to Star Wars. And Star Wars has had, at this point, 40 years of fans following it. You can't constantly put this up against Star Wars. It has to earn that. You can't say, well, without this, Star Wars wouldn't have been a thing, because then you put people in that mindset, and you're already, especially the way Star Wars fans are, you can't do that.
Well, and I think almost not only does it make comparisons, but I think it almost turns people against it. Like, oh, you're trying to say this is as good as Star Wars? Come on.
Exactly. It's Disney. Like I said, had they not try to make it Pirates of the Caribbean, had they not tried to force the Star Wars narrative with this, I think this is a solid sci-fi film. It's not going to be one that you're going to remember for years and years and years. You remember it now because of people constantly trashing it, calling it the biggest box office flop in history. Mm-hmm. But I think also this effectively, in my opinion, killed Taylor Kitsch's career.
I think between this and Wolverine.
Yeah. Between this and Wolverine, which didn't Wolverine come out before?
Wolverine was 2009, just a couple years
Yeah.
earlier. But there was
So
there was a period of a few years.
yeah,
Though,
so
where he had-
Wolverine flopping bad, which not Taylor Kitsch's fault, but he's attached to it. But then you give him John Carter, and John Carter flops. Taylor Kitsch basically became like
Battleship.
yeah, and then you got Battleship as well. He after that he basically became like generic villain characters or B characters in movies that maybe will pop up and you go, oh hey, that.
And I like him and everything he pops up in. Like, what was American
Yeah.
Assassin? He popped up and like, I really like Taylor Kitsch.
He was just in that Chris Pratt show that came out this year.
Oh, that
Terminal something.
Yeah, I forget the name of it too.
Terminal List? I think it's Terminal List.
Yeah,
he's in that. He was in season 2 or 3 of True Detective. I think it was season 3. Whatever one with Vince Vaughn, I think. It wasn't that good. But it's not Kitsch. It wasn't Kitsch's fault.
Right.
But it effectively did end his career. That and Battleship, both of those back to back. Just which Battleship, that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But
honestly, I mean, besides the marketing, I think was a problem, and I think people's expectations of it were a problem. I think if this had been, well, also I think Disney overspent on this property because I mean,
250 mil for this movie. They could have done it for at least 100 mil less.
I think this would have made a good like mid-budget sci-fi film, but they tried to make it into a giant blockbuster with an unknown property and a still up and coming actor and stuff. I think that they set themselves up to be a flop, but then on the fact that it flopped so hard. But yes, I agree that it gets unfairly just trashed. Now, I don't really like the movie that much. I think that aside from any comparisons to anything else, I think the story is just kind of okay. I think the look of a lot of the creatures and stuff, it just does not really impress me. It also gets really complex in terms of it starts off and there's throwing all these like weird sci-fi jargon at you, and there's like 4 different factions of creatures and people, and you're trying to figure out who's on what side and what's going on. And I still, at the end of the movie, I'm not quite sure who's with who.
They don't even show all the sub creatures because they were expecting sequels.
Yeah,
you only see 2, and you can tell them differently because of face paint, basically.
Right.
And then you got like two different groups of humans, which that's just 2 warring factions. You can tell one's got red, one's blue. That's how you can tell.
Honestly, you know what I really enjoyed was the stuff before he goes to Mars on Earth. We had Taylor Kitsch when he was like trying to escape over and over again.
Yeah, Bryan Cranston.
The stuff with his nephew when he first shows up, which is what's his name, Daryl
from Spy Kids.
Yeah, from Spy Kids. When he first shows up, I kind of liked all the Earth stuff more than I liked the stuff on Mars, honestly.
And then they also, I mean, I think, and once again, Mark Strong, solid villain, but he's not utilized to his fullest potential. And when they do start to utilize him, it's like, you needed more scenes with him to establish them as well. Same thing with Dominic West. He was fine, but not used fully because they really wanted to build this love story between Kitsch and Lynn Collins, who looked fucking gorgeous in this movie.
Lynn Collins, also from Wolverine. But yeah, she was gorgeous. I kind of thought she was going to have more of a career, but she never really took off, probably because of these same flops.
Yeah. But it was, both of them tied together in not the best way. But yeah, like cast-wise, it's got a very solid cast through it. You got, like I said, Willem Dafoe. I never say, or Lynn Collins' dad. I never say his name right.
Yaron?
Yeah, I never say
Saren Hines, yeah.
Yeah, Saren Hines. Like I said, Bryan Cranston is like the general with him at the beginning. Thomas Hayden Church, James Purefoy, who I have always liked. Even Samantha Morton. I think she's solid in most things. So it's got a good cast backing it, but like there are some things you watch in the movie where it's like they could have left that out and probably saved about a good 100 mil. Like the spaceships, you didn't need the spaceships in there. They were unnecessarily needed, but they probably cost a lot to put in the film. But yeah, I thought
it was 2 hours and 12 minutes long. So
yes, but
they could have cut some stuff. Yeah.
Shazam was 2 hours and 12 minutes long. So
agreed.
Everything that's considered an epic or to start a said franchise, unless it's a comedy, and even then some comedies still do also. 2 hours is not a long thing anymore. But it did get like to the third act, you're like, okay, we're at the final battle. And you're like, oh, nope, this is the mid battle. And then we're going to go back to the aliens and we're going to fight in a Coliseum. And then we're going to do the third battle. So it does do that thing, very Pirates of the Caribbean as well, where you think you're near the end. You're like, oh, okay, cool. This is a very tight knit film. And it's like, no, we're actually like, got still like 40 minutes left of this film. and we're gonna keep going. But like I said, it's not a perfect film. I'm not praising it like it's one of the best. No, it's an average sci-fi that is basically used as the punching bag for Disney and most movie people who want to bring box office into the equation. I think Taylor Kitsch was unfairly kind of been the fall guy for this. And even
honestly, it was one of the better things about it. I mean, I
Yeah.
liked him in this movie. I mean, yes, he looked stupid when he was like bouncing around, but that was more an effects thing than him.
Yeah, that's not his fault. That's
Yeah.
that's literally them at the time not do it. Which now, I mean, with Hulk and all them, they're able to make that stuff look fine now. Which honestly, that was the same year as no, that wasn't the same year as Avengers.
Same year as Avengers.
Was it 2012? Yeah, same year as Avengers, and probably around the same budget as Avengers. I think Avengers actually might have been cheaper.
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't know, but yeah.
I'm gonna look that up real quick. Anything else? Just ramble while I pull that up.
I have nothing else to ramble about. So yeah, the score. I like the score of the movie. I thought that was well done.
It was. Avengers was made for $30 million less. And think about everything that the Avengers had in it. The whole New York battle and everything. And it was $30 million less to make
cast they had to pay.
And the actors. The acting crew in that movie as well. But a lot of those actors like Hemsworth and Hiddleston, they weren't big yet. Right. But yeah, I said with John Carter, I think it's wrongfully mistreated. That's why I wanted to talk about it today. There were other movies I could have picked that I probably like more, but when I saw John Carter pop up, I was like, I want to have a reason to watch this again and just see if I still think that it's wrongfully accused of being one of the worst flops in history, which technically money-wise it still is. There's no way around that. But I remember watching this when it first came out and just like being like a defender of John Carter going, it's not that bad. Disney fucked it up. Leave John Carter alone. I was like that Save Britney person. Leave John Carter alone. But yeah, it's like I said, it's not something you guys should go out of your way to go see, but maybe pump the brakes on attacking John Carter because it doesn't deserve all the hate. Next, we're gonna go to Brian's pick, and he chose Best Kiss Award winner for the MTV Movie Awards, which is what it's best known for, 1999's Cruel Intentions. Cruel Intentions came out March 5th, 1999, had a budget of $10.5 million, had a weekend opening of $13 million, opened up number 2 its opening weekend, its highest ranking, and had a finished box office of $76.35 million, $38.77 million domestic, and $37.57 million international. So once again, people, box office things, this thing did a hell of a lot of money for the movie that it got made, but did spawn off some really, really shitty sequels. Brian, take it away about your MTV award-winning Best Kiss.
Yes. So Cruel Intentions came out in 1999. This is a movie. The logline for is 2 vicious step siblings of an elite Manhattan prep school make a wager to deflower the new headmaster's daughter before the start of the term. This is essential. This is not essentially. This is a remake of it's an adaptation of the book Dangerous Liaisons, and therefore a remake of the book of the movie Dangerous Liaisons, which actually the original version of it of the movie, which had like John Malkovich and Glenn Close and very different cast than this one, obviously, is actually a very good movie. But what I like about this movie is they take, because at the time, really, there was adult movies and there was teen movies. And the teen movies were all either comedic or they were very innocent. They were PG-13, and not talking about like horror movies, things like that. But this is a movie that took it's a teen movie, clearly a teen cast. These are all high school students, essentially. But it's very adult material. It's very mature material, which this is the kind of thing you see all the time now, especially with streaming shows. I think this is kind of the template that a lot of these kind of shows have come from, just in terms of the characters, in terms of the content, things like that. Where it didn't treat kids as, goofy comedic things. It kind of treated them like young adults and kind of got into the things that they would really think and do. So it was something at the time was, I think, very fresh, very original. I mean, even though it is a remake, but to take the story and put it in teen setting, I thought was a great idea. One thing you notice from frame one of this movie, this soundtrack is awesome. I love this soundtrack. I remember having this on repeat for like a couple of years after it came out. I don't know if people that come to it now will feel that way, but having, watched the movie at the time it came out, I love every track on this, and every time a song kicks in, I just love it in this movie. So the soundtrack's great. As far as your cast, you have the siblings, which are played by Sarah Michelle Gellar and Ryan Phillippe. Are the main two.
Which I
And Sarah
always
Michelle
say his
Gellar
name
at the
wrong.
time was already doing Buffy, and so she was already kind of a star on TV. But this is kind of the movie kind of breakthrough. It should have been the breakthrough for her. She didn't really do a ton after this. She showed up in I Know What You Did Last Summers and things like that. Although
Scooby-Doo,
actually that was
Grudge.
before this. But she didn't really, her movie career didn't take off the way you thought it would. Ryan Phillippe, this is kind of his big breakthrough. Again, he had been in movies before this, but he kind of got to, for a while, star in a lot of movies after this. Reese Witherspoon, obviously, she's the kind of the one that became the most successful. She is the girl Annette that they're making the bet about, that Ryan's character can bed her. Her career took off after this, so this is a great launch pad for her. But even the supporting cast with Selma Blair, you got Joshua Jackson in it, Sean Patrick Thomas, a whole lot. Tara Reid shows up in this. At the time, it was kind of like a who's who of who's like being in a lot of teen movies. And that's one thing that always gets me is I can't watch this movie. There's this movie, there's Can't Hardly Wait, and what was the other one? She's All That. There's movies I cannot watch anymore without thinking of Not Another Teen Movies version of all these scenes, especially the best kiss scene. It's like it's these are the movies that kind of focused on spoofing, and so it just reminds me of that. But yeah, I just enjoy this movie. It's basically a movie about these two rich kids who are, so rich and entitled that they're bored with their lives. It's just like they have everything they want. So basically they get their amusement by manipulating other people. And so it becomes these people are just pawns, these are just games in like their wager here. And I think that the two of them play those characters very well. I think that it's fun to watch them. It's like they're kind of allies and competitors at the same time because they work together because they both want to manipulate and mess up people's lives, but at the same time they're against each other in this bet. So there's an interesting dynamic between the two of them. Yeah, I'll get into more later. But what are your thoughts? Had you seen this before now?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Come on, dude.
I didn't know.
It's 1999. I'm 14. You're not telling me I'm gonna watch a movie where Buffy makes out with Selma Blair? Come on, dude, really? Did I remember most of it? No, I remember the end and I remember the kiss. I didn't really remember a whole lot past that. This movie, and not only manipulate, but it's manipulate through sex. If sex is not used,
this is a sexy ass movie. I'm just saying.
If sex is not used, then they don't want to play the game. Basically, to me, this was the movie where you realized that Buffy likes to fuck, and Buffy is sexy as shit. Not that she wasn't sexy as Buffy.
Oh my god, her in this movie is like the sexiest character I had seen on screen in a long time.
Yeah,
I felt like Ryan Phillippe every time because like there's like the one time where they're making the wager and whatever, and she goes, you can put it anywhere you want. And he's just like, ooh.
Then he's like, I'm not gonna do the bet. And then she says, he's like, okay, you're wrong.
And then later on, when she's like grinding up against him and stuff,
Yes.
and then she's like, oh, you didn't do it yet? Oh, down boy. And he's like, oh, come on. You feel that. You totally feel for him.
Basically, Freddie Prinze Jr. is a lucky man.
Yeah.
If she's anything like the character in this movie.
Yeah. Before that, she's always been kind of the kind of pure person.
Because you have her as Buffy, and yes, she has sex in Buffy, but she's still Buffy. And then even in Scooby-Doo,
she wasn't playing it up. Yeah,
even in Scooby-Doo, she's Daphne, but Daphne was always like sexy, but not sexual.
Innocent, sexy. Yeah,
exactly. They always try to make Velma like the kinky one, which Linda Cardellini.
I'll take Linda Cardellini.
Yes, please, absolutely. Not gonna lie, I'll take Linda Cardellini over Sarah Michelle Gellar any day, but that's just me personally. But I think they're both gorgeous, but Linda Cardellini does it for me.
Yeah.
ER. You watch ER, you'll understand. But yeah, and I've been honestly not gonna lie, I've been saying Ryan Phillippe's name wrong. I've been saying it Ryan Philippine with an N at the end of it.
Philippine?
Correct. Ryan Philippine. That's how I've said it pretty much my whole life.
Interesting. Okay.
Well, that's because when he first became big, that's literally how they did say their names on like TV. He was Ryan Philippine. And it wasn't until like I started doing trivia with you guys, I realized, shit, there's no N at the end of that. It's Philippine. but yeah, this movie is definitely overly sexual. So for you prudes out there, this is definitely not the movie for you. The one thing that
at the same time, they never show anything.
No, they don't. There's no nudity or anything. I mean, the closest you get is the sex scene with him and Reese, but even then, I mean, it's not
Even
anything.
then, it's like this. You see
Yeah,
that?
it's basically cleavage and just heavy panting and sweat. That's basically what it is. But yeah, I remember. What I didn't remember from back in the day that like watching it now, and I was like, is how childlike Selma Blair acts in this movie. Like I wouldn't say she's their age because they're probably like seniors.
It's probably like a freshman to their senior kind of thing.
Yeah, but gosh, she acts like she's fucking 12 years old in this movie. And it's kind of like yikes through most of it. I'm not the hugest Selma Blair fan, but man, in this, she is literally the worst part of this movie. And even that,
I wouldn't even call it bad, but I absolutely see your criticisms. It's kind of a caricature, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like how can I act like a child but still come off sexual because the character still needs to come off sexual. But like at the beginning of the movie, I mean, like I said, rewatching this because I haven't watched it probably since like 2000. I was not loving it because I was like, I know what the story is. Like, I'm waiting for it to grab me, and it honestly probably wasn't until Sebastian. I was about to say, what was Ryan's name in the movie? Sebastian and Reese, who plays Annette. It wasn't until they started their like game that I actually like really started to kind of care about the movie. Because like outside of that, yes, you have Sarah Michelle Gellar playing sexy as hell, and so the Sebastian character is just kind of like a little douche in the very beginning kind of deal, which I did like his little game he played at the beginning with the psychiatrist and her daughter, and like literally like her yelling at him through the window and he's picking up this girl next to him kind of thing. I was like, that's a boss ass move. But just like I wasn't really grabbing onto these characters except for Sarah for obvious reasons. But it wasn't until the game actually started between him and Annette that you start to get more character development with Sebastian, and with Annette, I mean, it's Reese Witherspoon. Reese Witherspoon's just so likable. She either comes off annoying or super likable. She treads that line very, very closely. More times she's going to fall into the likable range than the annoying, unless it's something like Election, where you're like, oh my god, shut the fuck up.
but again, that's you're supposed to think that.
Exactly. But even when in other movies where she's supposed to come off likable, she plays a character that's borderline.
Yeah, Reese can be a little irritating.
Yeah, but in this, she's fine because I mean she's not playing that kind of character role. But yeah, in terms of the movie itself, I forgot about Sean Patrick Thomas being in this, which I miss him. And he's not Dawn or anything. He pops up randomly. But remember when he was like the it guy in the 90s because of like Save the Last Dance and shit, and like, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's nothing anymore. He doesn't pop up in anything. Whenever he does pop up, I'm like, oh, like it's he's left a imprint on your brain when you haven't seen him in like 20 years and he randomly pops up and you remember his name because it's a 3-word name. You remember Sean Patrick Thomas, and it's like, wow, that dude for some reason has stuck here because I remember his name without even having to think, what the hell is his name? But yeah, the movie definitely succeeds on what it was promising, which was a young adult sexual film without going gratuitous or going R-rated with it. Even though it is R-rated because of language, but it, like I said, like how you said, it shows that like young adults can still be adults in a way. And it gives an alternative to some of the films that we had. Like you had like She's All That, which is almost kind of like the same kind of bet in a way, except not sexual because it's, towards younger teens and more of adult teens probably going into college. But it definitely, because that was the one thing I couldn't figure out is this a college or is this a high school?
It's a prep school. So it's a high school that's kind of like a rich prep school.
Because they kept going like campus and stuff. And I was like, I can't remember if this is high school or college. I was like, I want to say it's high school, but these Philippine or Sebastian and I keep calling her Sarah, Catherine, they act way older than high school kids in this movie. They act like college kids. But yeah, this is all happening during the summer as well, so school doesn't really come into play at all, really, until the very, very end. But no, it's fine. I liked it as it went on, but I've always had an issue with the ending. I've always never been a fan of how it ended with the Sebastian character. I always just kind of like, I was like that when I first saw it too. I was like really, that's the ending you gone with. Now the execution of it after it happens with Catherine and stuff, that was great. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with the outcome of Sebastian in the movie. That's the problem.
Which I mean, that goes back to the original novel and stuff like that. But obviously, they could have changed those kind of things. I will say though that I absolutely believed Ryan Phillippe's arc. I thought that he gets kind of criticized as kind of a bland actor and things like that.
He also comes off super stockier in this movie as well.
He does, but I mean, I think that I could totally buy that in the character, because he's a guy who's always just use women as like objects and playthings and things like that to manipulate. And he finds this girl that he actually ends up falling for and falls in love with, and he kind of decides, I don't want to be the old me. I want to change who I am. I don't want to be part of this bet kind of thing anymore. And yes, he comes across a little stalkery, but I totally believe his arc as far as falling in love with Annette. And while the ending, would I have liked it to end it differently? Sure, but again, I just write that off too. That's the book it's based on. That's how it ends. So
honestly, if you really, really think about it, the only thing that Annette does to really break down the walls is that she makes him laugh and calls him out on his bullshit. That's literally the only thing she does.
I think some people like that, they find somebody who's strong and calls them on their bullshit. It makes them all that more attracted to them. Yeah.
I still would not have walked away from her that one time in the bedroom though. I'm like, are you stupid? You're dumb. But yeah, and then how many times he says no to freaking Catherine in the movie? Like, dude, like, no. But yeah, Selma Blair, okay. It's like, no. What's wrong with you? But yeah, like I said, it's better than what I remember, but I still have little issues with it here and there. But I mean, it's still a sexy ass film. It really, really is.
And then this is where Ryan and Reese met and got married for a few years, had some kids. So you can definitely
no. They met in I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Reese Witherspoon was not in I Know What You Did Last
Summer.
I'm
sorry. I'm sorry. I thought you said Sarah and Ryan. My bad.
No, because they got Reese and Ryan got married and had kids.
They did. I thought you said Sarah and Ryan because they first met in.
Yeah. So I felt there was kind of real chemistry here. You could tell. I will say that there were sequels made. The first sequel was actually the pilot for a TV show they were going to try and make out of this movie. None of the same people are involved in it. Not the directors, not the actors. Nobody.
It's a prequel to the.
Yeah, so they ended up, it was going to be called like Manchester Prep or something like that. But then they decided, it's not going to go forward, so let's release it on video as Cruel Intentions 2. And so I never actually saw it, but I've heard nothing but horrible things about it. And then they made a third one direct to video as another sequel. But again, nobody involved. So those are kind of in the sequels that don't exist category.
Yeah, I think the only cast members in the sequel was that I knew was probably the girl that was taking Sarah Michelle Gellar's spot, and she's not even a big name. She's like, oh, I remember seeing her face, but the person who plays Sebastian is like, I have no idea who this actor is, kind of thing. But that is something that, and especially in the '90s, even though this was '99, you got that. So you'd have a successful comedy. And they would continue with sequels potentially for movies, but you'd get a lot of like American Pie had Bandcamp. But that was like after was it the second or third movie that went to theaters? They finally we want to continue American Pie, and they kept doing Van Wilder was the same way where they
honestly the American Pie ones weren't bad, I will say.
I didn't mind
for what they were.
I didn't mind the Bandcamp one. I didn't watch was it Naked Mile or was that Van Wilder?
Oh, there was like 4 or 5. Naked Mile was American Pie. There was like 3 or 4 of them at least. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I only watched the Bandcamp one and that was it. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a solid film. It's a solid film. It's actually, I think it's still worse by today's standards. But yes, Selma Blair's character is they're treading a fine line.
She is over the top. Yes,
they're treading a fine line with that character in this movie. But yeah, especially once they start actually making her do sexual stuff, it's like. Should I be feeling uncomfortable right now? I don't know if I should, because she's definitely old enough, and the actress is, but the character is like, you might be like 16, but you have the emotional like mindset of like an 11-year-old child.
It certainly seems that way. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to add?
No, that about covers it.
All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Weekly Crusaders. If you guys did, hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel so you guys stay up to date with all the latest videos pop up on the Movie Crusaders. And of course, leave the follow us on all the social media outlets you see below. Out right now, we have a non-spoiler / spoiler review of Shazam! Fury of the Gods. Also, if you guys wanted to see what we thought of the Oscars, not what we thought, our predictions before the Oscars actually happened, as well as our picks for who we think should have won Best Actor, Actress, and all the big 5 awards. Our Oscar show is available as well. But coming up next, we have Cinemasochism. And boy, is this movie a fun doozy.
It's another 90s teen movie starring superstars like Paul Walker and Denise Richards.
But not the movies that you're probably thinking of. So that's coming out next. And then next week, we've got John Wick 4 or Chapter 4. I don't know. Is it Chapter 4 or is it just John
Chapter
Wick?
4.
Chapter 4, as well as Tetris. And then we'll have another episode of Weekly Crusaders and Cinemasochism. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do for my next pick for next week. I'm decided between 2 films. It's either going to be a raunchy sex college comedy, or it's going to be one of the better comic book sequels before the MCU showed up. Yeah, so I'm trying to decide between those 2, and Brian is picking an animated film for a franchise that he actually normally usually bashes and badmouths, but he actually liked this animated one, and I did too. And there is a story about this animated film that I actually have that really started this whole thing. So yeah, those are our clues for next week. We hope you guys stick around and watch that, as well as another episode of Cinemasochism on top of the one that we're about ready to release. So be on the lookout out for all those. We are the Movie Crusaders. My name's Sean Waskrew. That is Brian Michaels. And until next time, in case we don't see you, go watch some movies and go have some fun.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.